All right. It's been about a month since I've done a video. I read every day, so been reading a lot of different books and all, and just haven't been having chance to review them, and been reading different type of books that I don't really have a firm understanding on, so I can't do a review on something that I'm still trying to like dig deeper in. So I don't apologize for it or nothing. I do them when I feel like it. But you know, it's July already, and my plan for the year in January was to review some books that I had already read. Just books that I think any African American young man should read. You know, so I don't know. Maybe I'll start that. It's just hard to go back because I'm so curious about so many different things. It's just hard for me to reread a book I read before, which I know I should because, and I'm gonna put the glasses on so I could feel educated. I know I should. No, I'm not because these are reading glasses. I know I should because when I do go back and read certain things from a different perspective, because see, I started I started reading books about like by James Baldwin and about the struggle for African American rights in the United States of America. I started when I was like 13 years old. Right. I used to go to the library like Native Son, Richard Wright, and all that. I read those books when I was like 13 years old, and I was from a very sheltered background. I was basically raised in church, so my my knowledge of the world was very, very limited. So, I didn't really know that much about anything. So I was reading these books and, I didn't really have a grasp on them, but I just wanted to know where it all started. Before I even went to elementary school, I was living with my grandmother and her sister. We were sitting on a porch in Opelousas, Louisiana, and I went somewhere with my cousin, and I guess we went through the white part of town, you know. And I saw this little white boy with his dad, and they was on the front lawn, and they had this nice brick house. And then I go back to my grandmother's house, and we were living in basically these old slave cabins, you know. We had an outhouse in the back, like we didn't even have a bathroom. This was like in 1984. Then I asked my auntie, I said, why do the white people live such and such like that and we live like this? I mean, because we just, I'm telling you, it was just very deplorable. I romanticize it now as an adult, but like the conditions that my grandmother and my mother and them was living at that time in Opelousas, Louisiana was deplorable. you know, I think I had a cousin that was living like in a trailer, and across the street, like from my grandmother's house, there was just this big field. And they used to have a man come in. It always reminded me of death. It used to scare me because he would wear a hood over his head, and he had a sickle. It was like this was like in the 80s, man. It was like I didn't even like we didn't have a McDonald's or anything. Like we did. I mean, most of my grandmother and them, they didn't even have cars. Like we did everything. We had this little one store called Johnson's, and they go walk to the store, and go get a meat special or something. And we used to pick pecans and bring them to the store, and they probably wasn't paying us nothing. They probably was making like 10 times the amount selling them, but they give us a certain amount of money for a pound. This was like before I was even in elementary school. I still remember this. You know, I mean, my brother was sleeping with my grandma, and I think I was sleeping in the bed with my other brother in this little 2-bedroom house. And then we had like 5 of our cousins living over there because their mother was in jail. It was a deplorable situation. I romanticize about it. So as I grew up, I just wanted to know why that was, and that's what actually got me into reading. That's actually got me being like just crazy about history, or about African Americans in the United States of America. I studied that for years. I used to skip school and go to the New Orleans Public Library. There was this on the second floor, this African American Resource Center, and you could not check some of the books out. And I would sit there all day and read those books. I was like 12, 13 years old. So this is why this subject is just like so in depth to me. I actually wanted to be a history professor, but politics, and they want to work at a college now. You got to be just this raging liberal, and I'm not that. I mean, I'm not MAGA, but I'm not AOC either. You know what I'm saying? So, but maybe one day I'll get into that, and then I want to teach people that want to learn. I feel like it's a waste of time teaching people that's just there a captive audience. You know what I'm saying? That's just crazy to me. I agree with something my daddy used to say. He said all the children that don't want to go to school, they should put them in a field and let them pick vegetables and cotton. And give them a little money, and they can do that for the rest of their life. If they're not interested, because if you're not interested in like learning, then that's what you should be doing, and that's fine. That's not a bad life, because you are doing something to help society. Or put them on a garbage truck. But I'm rambling. Anyway, the book, man. Daniel Brook, The Accident of Color. A story of race and reconstruction. Awesome book, man. I haven't even finished. I still got 2 more chapters to go, but I want to talk about this book. Drink water, man. Drink water as much as you can. Cut out the sodas and stuff. Accident of Color. Daniel Brook, author. He lives in New Orleans. I was shocked. I'm really big on this now. When I read a book, I really want to know about the author. I really want to know about his background and what, because I want to know where he's coming from. This guy, was born in Brooklyn, raised on Long Island, educated at Yale, and lives in New Orleans. And I can tell you, man, so far this book is awesome, man. This book is awesome. I've learned so much. I mean, I've learned so much even about New Orleans, and I've been living here for many years. But I never, that whole, like, people talk about the Treme area and Creoles, and oh man, I think that should just be studied. Like, we should have museums about that. Because I mean, he talks about New Orleans and Charleston, South Carolina, where I went in 2015. I visited there in 2015. It was right before, God forbid, that guy went and killed those people in that church. I mean, we left there like the week before that happened. Dylan Roof, and I was working for this company called ACL, and I went to training in Connecticut, and they flew me from New York to Charleston, South Carolina. It was right by the College of Charleston, and it's like, man, it's like you could just feel it. You feel you in the South, the weather. Didn't spend that much time there. We was there for like 3 days, went out that Friday, but and I started hearing the comparisons about Charleston and New Orleans. I started studying how you had this big population of free black people. Like, a lot of these people, they were descended from slave owners, and maybe their mother was a slave, and their father, was a owner, plantation owner, or whatever situation it was. And a lot of these people had a significant amount of money. They were very rich. They talked about, I knew about New Orleans, how they basically ran all the trades. I mean, before slavery. So many of them owned slaves. Many of them owned slaves, I mean, for years and years. And so after the Civil War, they became black people. And many of them fought that, And I mean, I don't agree with Tariq Nasheed and all them many things, but they got it right when they talk about that bouye, And I went to Dillard University, so I know it firsthand, and but I didn't know where these people come from, you know. And my mother was dealing with a guy just like this guy owned like acres and acres of land, and he had a picture of his mother and how she looked just like a white woman. You would think she's white. And in New Orleans, it's like that. I had a professor at school, and you would actually think this lady was white, but she was black. And like you see, her sister might be as dark as me. You know what I'm saying? Or her mama might be as dark as me or her cousin, but they were black. And these people had their own. I think when you go back and you start talking about black history, I think you need to differentiate. Because a lot of people, like, they talk about Treme and they say, oh, it's the oldest black neighborhood. But these people were what they call Creoles. These people were mixed. They had French fathers. I really believe that's where my father's family, my mother's family were slaves. They were from, North Carolina, Virginia, and they were brought to New Orleans. But my father's family, they had been here for years, and they owned property. I mean, they still own property. I just talked to a cousin of mine. He's in California. I hope he comes down because I want him to bring me to the property that like my dad's great grandfather owned. And they were on the census, they were considered mulattoes. They weren't considered black or Africans or whatever. You know, and this was a whole different class. A lot of these people had rights. A lot of these people could, they say go to shows or get on a streetcar because they weren't considered Negro. But then after the Civil War, the white people realized that these people would become the leaders, and now they would become the leaders of the Negro population. And in Louisiana, South Carolina, many places in the South, they had the advantage. And this is where the whole civil rights thing, I mean, the book is amazing because it talks about the Civil Rights Acts of 1867, and it shows you basically history just repeated itself after the Civil War. And then you go to the 60s, it's like they did that before. 100 years before, you got bus boycott. Well, it wasn't bus boycott, it was streetcars. You had sit-ins. You had people getting killed. And within a couple of years, they said the white Democrats, and people argue that this was the Democrat Party of the day. I'm not getting into that. But the Democrats at the time, when they got power, they just flipped all the laws back. I mean, they held power for 100 years until like the 1960s, the 70s. So I could understand why, that class of people, because if you realize that you look at Cory Booker and, all these people, it's like they in that class. I'm telling you, you read some of these names, especially in New Orleans, it's the same people that's around here now. But there's this, they were free during slavery, and they didn't consider themselves Negroes. But when the Civil War started, they became the leader of Negroes. Because they wanted the civil rights, because the book actually does a beautiful job and talked about how they were freemen and freedmen. The freedmen were slaves, and they talked about they wanted land reform, they wanted reparations. They were talking about, hey, we need a leg up. But then you had this class of Creoles or mixed or whatever you want to call them, freemen that were free before slavery. They had the money, so their focus was just on, okay, I want to be able to ride this bus. I want to be able to ride this train. I want to be able to, not be discriminated against. That was more important to them than, okay, my family been working this land for many, many years. we need some acres to be ours, reparations, 40 acres and a mule, because they had the 40 acres and a mule, you know. And I think that's something that when you talk about Black history, that's forgotten because it's like this monolithic. We were all slaves, and you know what I'm saying, and up from slavery and all. And I think that was the big thing with W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. It was all, and it's still that now. And Malcolm X talking about the field nigga and the house nigga, but I mean, these people were not house niggas. These people actually owned slaves. There was one he talked about that owned the plantation that had like hundreds of slaves. You know, I read somewhere in New Orleans you had more black, I can't say black. You had more Creole mixed slave owners than white, and they were more harsh than the actual white ones. So you know, beautiful book, man. I'm telling you, a lot of information. If you're interested in that history, if you're interested in the history of New Orleans, you're interested in African American history, it is a must read. A must. I'm going to finish it today. Really, I need to. I'm going to go back to Charleston, South Carolina, too, and spend like a few weeks there because I didn't stay there that long. But man, just the similarities between the South and New Orleans, and I guess being port cities. That was why. So, The Accident of Color, Daniel Brook, awesome book. Read it.